Hey everyone, and welcome! Today, we're going to tackle a really big, fundamental economic question, the business cycle. We're going to explore why economies seem to swing back and forth between boom and bust, and we'll break it all down using some core economic ideas. So let's get right into it.
It all boils down to this one question, right? For centuries, we've seen market economies achieve this incredible growth. But, that growth has never, ever been a straight line. It's always marked by these amazing periods of prosperity, but they're followed by really painful downturns. So what is actually going on here?
The best way to think about this isn't some smooth, steady upward climb. It's way more like a roller coaster. Yeah, there's an overall upward trend over the long run for sure, but the ride itself, it is full of these huge, dramatic peaks and valleys. These alternating periods of, expansion and contraction, that's what economists call business cycles. Okay, so to really get a handle on this roller coaster, we gotta break it down into its different parts. Economists have pretty much identified 4 key phases that every single cycle moves through.
The hugely influential economist John Maynard Keynes, he put it really simply. He called it a trade cycle, which is just another name for a business cycle, and defined it as this fundamental swing. A swing between good times, with lots of jobs and rising prices, and bad times, with high unemployment and falling prices. It's really the basic rhythm of the economy.
So here's how the cycle unfolds, in 4 pretty clear stages. It kicks off with an expansion. That's the good times, when the economy's growing. That growth leads to a peak, the absolute highest point. And then, the turn. A contraction begins, what we often call a recession. Finally, the economy hits bottom at the trough before recovering starts, and the whole thing begins all over again.
Okay, so now we know what the cycle looks like. But, the billion-dollar question is, why? Why does it happen at all? Why can't the economy just grow smoothly? Well, economists have been debating this for decades, and their ideas usually fall into 2 big camps.
So the first camp asks a pretty provocative question. They look at our banking and financial system and ask, is that the cause of all this? Is it really all just about the flow of money and credit? And that's the heart of what we call monetary theories. The idea is pretty simple. The cycle is driven by the banks. When they open the tabs and expand credit, interest rates fall, and it becomes super cheap for businesses to borrow and invest. That fuels a boom. But when that credit eventually tightens up, interest rates go up, investment dries up, and that boom flips right into a bust.
But hold on, what if it's not just the banks? The other camp looks at a completely different culprit, us. Our collective decisions, our psychology, and our spending habits.
These are the demand-side theories. Keynes, for example, argued that investment is just incredibly volatile. Why? Because it's all driven by our expectations about the future, what he famously called our animal spirits. A wave of optimism can sweep through and create a massive boom, but a sudden wave of pessimism can cause the whole thing to come crashing down. It's all about the psychology of spending.
So, there you have it. 2 powerful, competing explanations. One group sees the cycle as this kind of mechanical process driven by the supply of money and credit from banks. The other sees it as a deeply human process, driven by the psychology of demand. Now, in the real world, the truth is probably a pretty complex mix of both.
Now, regardless of what actually starts the cycle, there's this incredibly powerful engine that keeps it going, and it makes both the booms and the busts way bigger than they otherwise would be. And this engine is created by the interplay of 2 really key economic ideas.
First up, we've got something called the multiplier. Think of it like this. If a company decides to invest $100 to build something, that money doesn't just stop there. Nope, it becomes income for construction workers and suppliers. They then go out and spend a chunk of it, which becomes income for, a grocery store owner, and so on and so on. That first $100 creates this ripple effect, leading to a much, much larger increase in total economic activity. And next, we've got its partner in crime, the accelerator. This idea says that when people's incomes start to rise and they start buying more stuff, businesses have to ramp up investment in new machines and new factories just to keep up with all that demand. So even a small increase in what we're all buying can trigger a much bigger and accelerated increase in business investment.
Okay, now this is where it gets really interesting. The multiplier and the accelerator, they don't work in isolation. They feed each other. More investment creates more income because of the multiplier. That higher income then triggers even more investment because of the accelerator. You see? It creates this incredibly powerful feedback loop that can send the economy soaring or, on the flip side, spiraling downwards.
And this brings us to a huge insight from the Nobel laureate Paul Samuelson.
He showed that you don't always need some big external shock to cause a business cycle. The internal mechanics of the economy itself, this sort of dance between the multiplier and the accelerator, are powerful enough to create these waves all on their own.
So this brings us to the big "so what" question. I mean, these theories are fascinating, right? But why does taming this cycle matter so much? Well, because the downswing, that contraction phase, it isn't just a line on a graph. It has a real and often devastating human cost.
When the economy contracts, people lose their jobs on a massive scale. Businesses that were doing great just a year before suddenly go bankrupt. People lose their life savings, their homes. And this isn't just about numbers. It's about the very real anxiety, the misery, and the loss of dignity that comes with a severe recession. And this quote from the economist G. Crowther, it really drives the point home. He talks about the misery and shame of unemployment and the social disturbances it can create. This is the real reason why trying to understand and maybe even soften these cycles is one of the most important goals in all of economics.
And that leaves us with the final, absolutely critical question. We understand the mechanics of the cycle better today than ever before. We have policy tools, like central banks raising or lowering interest rates that are designed to smooth out the ride. But given these deep-seated forces of finance and human psychology that are always at play, can we ever truly tame this economic roller coaster? Or are booms and busts just an inevitable part of our economic lives? That is something to think about.